On Friday, January 22nd, USDA released a couple of reports that I think are going to have some important meaning for livestock markets, for cattle markets in particular in this case. The first one's the cattle on feed report, and the second one's the cold storage report. So if we look at the cattle on feed report, really we've had a couple of running themes throughout the year so far. One is that we've had fewer placements than the year before in most months of the year. So we've been putting fewer cattle on feed. One of the other trends or themes in the report over the last year has been we're placing heavier animals. So the feeders going in are heavier. We're placing more of the heavier animals. So if we look at fewer placements first, really we've been driven by fewer cows and fewer calves from the year before, contributing to placements in 2015, and also some huge financial losses in the feeding industry, particularly in the late or second half of 2015. On the heavier placement side, really it goes along with the incentive to finish cattle at heavier and heavier weights, so we try to place them at heavier weights also. So the report that was released this afternoon had a couple of keys in it. One, placements were slightly lower, less than 1% lower than the year before. So we placed fewer cattle. All of the weight categories where we increased placements, they were all in the heavier cattle weights, the over 800 pounds and the over 700 pounds. So again, we placed fewer, but we placed more in that heavy category. The result of the report, though, is that cattle on feed, the total numbers on feed, were actually about 0.5% lower than the year before. I think as the market digests this, as people digest this report over the weekend, I think we're going to talk about this being a relatively bearish report in terms of the futures market, because placements were bigger than expected and marketings were actually lower than expected. And I think there's one other interesting thing in that report, and that's really this report gives you the quarterly breakdown of the number of heifers on feed and steers on feed. So we get this breakdown as to what the mix of animals is. The cattle on feed report data goes back in this form, goes back to 1996. So we can go back that far easily. And this is the fewest number of heifers on feed, January 1, in the last 20 years, which really gives you a little more evidence of the strength of expansion going on, is that we've got more steers on feed than we did a year ago, and we got a record small number of heifers on feed. I mentioned another report that came out at the same time this afternoon, and that's the cold storage report. And really the reason that that's interesting is that throughout the course of 2015, we've built up the amount of beef in refrigerated warehouses or cold storage to record high levels. It's been very rare. There's only a couple of months in history back to the early 1970s that we actually had more beef in storage. And this report just basically shows out that in December, we put more beef in cold storage. We've got more than we did in November, and it just points out that there's a heck of a lot of beef in cold storage. What that means is in the past, that's always been thought of as a harbinger of poor demand for beef. People aren't eating it, so it sits in the icebox. In this case, I think it's really related to the large amounts of beef imports that we've brought in because of our record high prices, strength of the dollar, drought in Australia, a host of factors that surged the amount of beef into the U.S. And when it comes here, it's got to stay someplace cold, so it stays in the cold chain along the way. And so because of that, we've got record large amounts for December amount of beef. If we go forward throughout the year, it's really a heck of a lot of beef in cold storage. Most of it is boneless, meaning that it's beef that's here to be ground into ground beef. And it's a large supply that we've got to work off going through 2016. And one of the things I think we'll see in 2016 is that amount in storage begins to decline as our imports, I think, are going to back off in the year, and that'll help pull that storage number down. But it's a large amount of beef supplies on our market than we had a year ago, and certainly than we've had in most of the last 40 years. One other point, a week from now, the USDA's cattle inventory will come out, and that's going to give us a good snapshot picture of the rate of expansion, the number of cows in the U.S., and I think most of us expect that number to be larger than a year ago. So we'll do a little more on that next time.